The House Chairperson.
There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer meditation. Please be seated. The Secretary will read the order.
Debate on vote number 8, National Treasury Appropriation Bill.
I now call upon the Honorable the Minister of Finance to start the debate. Honorable Minister.
Honorable Chairperson of the Standing Committee of Finance and Standing Committee of Appropriations, fellow members of this House. Chairperson, it is a privilege to deliver before you and the country this year's budget for the National Treasury. Section 216 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, supported by the Public Finance Management Act and the Municipal Finance Management Act, clearly defines the obligations of the National Treasury. In essence, the Constitution demands that the department be transparent, accountable, and efficient in the allocation and distribution of public money, while ensuring that sustainable public finance contribute to exclusive economic growth. Honorable members, the budget vote I present today therefore reflects a balance between the technical and the political, the practical and the aspirational. It is a balance between macro and microeconomics that in turn reflects balance between local constraints and global realities, as well as we being a balance between laws, policies, and the ongoing journey we are on a nation toward a more equitable society. The department has a budget, excluding direct charges, over the medium term is 91,835, 91, let me put it this way, 92 billion. The big went in Sogolis. The largest component is for transfers to the South African Revenue Services, which is allocated 47.7 billion. To put it differently, 9.8% of the department's budget for operations and capital projects over the medium term. This is an increase of 8 billion of SARS baseline component to the 24 estimates. Part of this increase is to improve effectiveness in revenue collection by enhancing their ability to collect that through better systems, increase staff capacity, and modernizing their processes to establish e-invoicing for VAT, instant payment systems, and upgrades to monitor progress and improve transparency. Last week, we published monthly debt collection data from SARS for the first time. The budget is allocation, economic classification over the medium term is as follows. 3.4 billion on compensation of employees, 6.9 billion on goods and services, 78.5 billion on transfers and subsidies, 89 million on payment of capital assets, 2.7 billion for financial assets. Function as National Treasury is to achieve sustainable public finances, and for this we require sound controls to realize our goals in lowering poverty and greater inclusion. Our annual performance plan for 25-26 sets out a clear and ambitious departmental program to achieve these outcomes. In pursuit of sustainable public finances, Chairperson, allow us to go into some detail about how we intend to achieve some of the objectives and to update the House on the progress already made, and also the road that still lays ahead for us. In terms of restoring sustainability and impact of our public finances, our spends money has been central to our policy efforts. National priorities, we need to realize our greater efficiency on spending side. Since 2013, 276 reviews have been completed. I will be going to Cabinet to get commitment from colleagues to implement the outstanding recommendations arising out of these spending reviews. This includes our review of government spending on the numerous public employment and labor market activation programs across the government, which has recommended rationalization of 37 programs across 16 departments. Beyond this, there are new reviews that we plan to conduct, namely audit of ghost workers. We also want to do a review of the infrastructure conditional grants. On development, just another area of work. We have said through growing primary surplus, the public debt to GDP ratio will stabilize over time and ensure that the government does not rely on additional borrowing to cover its non-interest expenses. Work on additional fiscal measures is ongoing. The department is currently assessing public comments and submissions to the technical papers published along with the national budget document on the 21st of May. It is in this spirit that the country's fiscal macroeconomic policy work is progressing well on the proposed lower inflation target. We all agree that lower inflation is good for the economy. There's no dispute about that. There's, however, been some confusion as to the process of setting inflation target policy in South Africa. It needs to be clarified that this policy is a responsibility and resides with the Minister of Finance, who sets the target in consultation with the South African Reserve Bank. This then South African Reserve Bank operating independently to achieve that target. Honourable members, let me make the point that such decision should not be taken in haste without the necessary technical and political engagement that achieves a genuine consensus grounded in thorough consideration of the social and economic realities. Looking at your time, Honourable Chairperson, deal what were around a comprehensive review of the budget process itself. Clearly, over the mid-term, all of us have realized that there's substantial need to do a review of the budget process. And that review has resulted in actionable performance proposal, of which the short-term changes will be implemented in 2026 budget process. The changes include cabinet approval of a budget guidelines in order to strengthen the technical and political interface. And that budget process will probably be achieved on the 21st of July when cabinet meets. Having said all of that, I also touch on what is going to cabinet. This House passed a new procurement bill. What that new procurement bill does, it gives effect to the constitutional injunction. And there are three parameters associated with that. And there's a tendency for people to look at one, not in the Constitution as a whole. What does subsection 1 of that Constitution say? Subsection 1 of that Constitution says we must have a fair, transparent, and competitive bidding process. In other words, any suggestion that we should do away with tendering is a suggestion which is in fact in opposition to the Constitution as it stands. That's one section. There's a group of people that tend to read that in isolation to the second two parts of the Constitution. The second two parts of the Constitution relates to empowerment. And that particular section clearly says, subsection 2B, that legislation must give effect to deal with the previously disadvantaged community of the country. It therefore also an insult to the Constitution to suggest that any legislation which is intended to achieve that objective, to attack a legislation which is intended to that objective. I wanted to raise these issues because that legislation is going to come. We're finalizing as required by the legislature, the rules, which are, once you finalize the rules and then the legislation and bring them to Parliament, it becomes effective. I'm also happy to say that our endeavors, not just the National Treasury, but the government as a whole, to remove South Africa from the Financial Action Task Force grey list are succeeding. It's quite important to say government as a whole. And it was an important experiment that we did when we put all government as a whole to work together and ended up with a legislation which we called Omnibus Bill, which we managed, then I think we're beginning to succeed on the grey listing. But to complement and finalize this work, a general laws anti-money laundering and combating terrorism finance bill to further improve our ability to combat money laundering, terrorism financing, and proliferation financing is being finalized for another round of public comment and tabling in Parliament in the quarter of 2025. Similarly, National Treasury has made substantial progress in implementing State Capture Commission recommendations through multiple concrete actions. SARS investigation have recovered 4.8 billion in unpaid taxes, with professional bodies like SAICA having imposed consequence management, including disbursement. The Financial Intelligence Center launched what is called the Enablers Project with law enforcement to trace state capture funds flows. And a 10-year ban was imposed on a company, Bain & Company, which is currently under litigation. Critical, a central register now tracks dismissed officials and those who have resigned from during the disciplinary processes across all government spheres. In conclusion, House Chair, the interventions I've outlined are just some of the measures that will be undertaken in the first year of the execution of the departmental's 25 to 2030 strategic plan. They present a department effort on achieving sustainable public finances, advocating a coherent economic policy, ensuring sound financial controls and management of public finances, and increased public infrastructure. I must thank the team of National Treasury for splendid work, technical competency, and efficiency. I want to thank them for that. I know I had to summarize the speech and hoping that DM Sarupeni will build up where I've left off. At least we still have some coherence in Treasury. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The next speaker is the Honorable Maswanganyi.
Thank you, Chairperson, honorable members, Minister, Deputy Ministers. Chairperson, first, please allow me to extend my deepest condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues of our late Deputy President, Honorable D.D. Mabuza. May his legacy continue to inspire us, and may his soul rest in peace. Chairperson, the Standing Committee on Finance and the ANC support Vote 8. Having reviewed the APPs and strategic plans of the department and entities, we are confident that the National Treasury is on the right track. Chairperson, South Africa faces challenging economic conditions, both globally and domestically. Considering the country's resilience, it is crucial to make difficult decisions now. The 2025-2026 budget aims to restore public finances to a sustainable path. This budget details tax increases and spending cuts designed to reduce the fiscal deficit and stabilize public debt growth, all while protecting vital social and economic programs. In the 2025-26 financial year, as the Minister has alluded, National Treasury's total appropriation amounts to 29.97 billion. Chairperson, in the budget year under review and MTF, government has allocated more money to infrastructure, 1.03 trillion. While the committee acknowledges this strategic shift toward preserving and improving existing infrastructure assets, it remains concerned that these efforts are not adequately reflected in the planning, budgeting, and performance reporting instruments. Minister, the committee therefore recommends that the National Treasury explicitly include infrastructure maintenance as a standalone strategic indicator in the APP. Chairperson, we note that SARS is allocated 15.4 billion, up from 12.39 billion. This allocation supports SARS operational priorities across its core functions of tax administration, custom enforcement, and revenue collection. We welcome this significant increase in funding, and thanks to the Minister of Finance for heeding its repeated calls for stronger budgetary allocations to SARS. The committee welcomes the recent growth in complaints handled and resolved by the Office of the Tax Ombud, as well as its role in addressing systemic issues that affect large categories of taxpayers. However, we note that the OTO remains significantly under-resourced relative to its expanding mandate and growing public profile. Can this matter be looked at? Chairperson, we note also the role that is played by GTEC in facilitating employment opportunities of 333,000. In terms of the FSCA, we know the strategic importance of the FSCA as the dedicated market conduct regulator. We also welcome the FSCA's continued enforcement efforts addressing pension fund non-compliance, including legal action against defaulting institutions. As a committee, we are planning to meet with SALGA and some of the defaulting municipalities. It is very painful for employees who have worked for the rest of their lives only to be told when they retire that the employer was not making pension contributions. There must be consequences for such irresponsible employers. The Land Bank. Chairperson, the committee recognizes progress in the Land Bank's balance sheet recovery and increased access to finance for Black producers. However, we remain concerned about the concentration of lending in specific provinces and the limited reach to smaller farmers. The Land Bank should give loans and support to the previously disadvantaged. Chairperson, we also welcome the DBSA's consistent record of clean audits, its compliance with the PFMA and King IV governance standards, and its strong internal controls. Chairperson, we call upon the DBSA to report annually to Parliament on the distribution of its infrastructure investments, the participation of Black-owned contractors. Chairperson, we recognize the PIC's central role in managing over 2.8 trillion in public assets on behalf of GEPF. The committee notes PIC's improving liquidity. Be that as it may, Minister, can you please attend to the issue of the daybreak? Members of Parliament have raised the issue of daybreak seriously so. In terms of the last entity that is also doing quite well is Sasria. We note that Sasria remains a financial sustaining and strategically significant state-owned insurer, providing cover against specific risks such as riots, civil commotion, terrorism, and public disorder, risks that are excluded from conventional insurance policies. We welcome Sasria's continued progress in restoring its capital position following the substantial claims arising from the 2021 unrest. The committee also encourages Sasria to expand its work on transformation, including deepening its support for Black-owned underwriting management agencies and emerging insurers. Chairperson, having considered the strategic plans, annual performance plans, and proposed budgetary allocations of National Treasury and its associated public entities, we therefore support budget vote 8. You can see it.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Next speaker is the Honourable Van Rooyen.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. We stand here to remind our people of the importance of National Treasury as the glue that is expected to hold all government's operations together. National Treasury as the center that supposes to ensure prudency of fiscal and financial management of our beloved country. We speak of national treasury that is expected to excel in promoting the government's fiscal policy and coordinating macroeconomic policy as well as managing the budget preparation process. This is what a functional national treasury should be doing. And this is our version as MK Party of a national. As demonstrated in the past 3 decades, the story of South Africa National Treasury is a very painful one. It is characterized by years of unfulfilled promises and missed targets. According to this budget vote and all other similar votes that came before this House, National Treasury was supposed to have played a pivotal role in building a competent, morally upright, and progressive developmental state. This target has been dismally missed, with all spheres of government, as we are speaking, failing to deliver on basic services. For the past 30 years, through this budget vote, vote 8, National Treasury has been promising our people facilitation and implementation of policies and strategy aimed at transforming the economy to become more inclusive and diverse and job-oriented. We all know that this is a big fat lie. On National Treasury watch, economy is not growing, unemployment and inequality are at their highest. For years, National Treasury has been using this budget to promise that it will empower local government. 30 years down the line, the country has been experiencing deterioration in service delivery and collapsing municipalities. National Treasury has been using this budget vote, among other things, to raise its commitment to fighting fraud and corruption. But the reality of the matter is that National Treasury fails to deal with corruption within its own ranks. SIU and AG's office confirmed acts of corruption and fraud by National Treasury officials when awarding a multi-million rand tender related to integrated financial management system in 2017. 10 years down the line, instead of dealing with established acts of corruption and fraud, National Treasury is claiming to challenge SIU and AG's funding. As if that was not enough, now we are told by the minister that National Treasury will be renegotiating the terms of this contract with one of the service providers.
Order, honorable
Oracle.
members. Order.
National Treasury can provide MK Party with a simple request. Give us your debt management strategy, Minister. You came here and you told us about inflation targeting. Inter alia, inflation targeting is not the only critical aspect of a debt management strategy. If you want to reduce the ratio of debt to GDP, please, Minister, make sure that you present a comprehensive budget management strategy that will guide this country on how we are going to deal with the impact of the rising debt service cost. And definitely, National Treasury in its current status is not in a form that we can say is a glue that is taking
your
our
time is
country
now
somewhere.
expired.
National Treasury
Thank you.
is not in a state that this budget vote can be supported. As a MK Party, we vehemently reject
Honourable member,
budget
your
vote
time
A.
has
Thank you.
expired. The next speaker is the Honourable Alexander. Order, honourable members.
Honourable House Chair, today I rise to address Vote 8 on the National Treasury, not just as a steward of the public purse, but as a citizen committed to rebuild on a country on the brink. Let me state this unequivocally. The DA's participation in the GNU is not ceremonial. It is absolutely critical. This budget formulation is not one of convenience, but one of necessity. Within the DA's presence, the Treasury will remain
Order, honourable
valuable
members.
to the
Order, honourable member. Honourable Ditebe, let's give the member at the podium a chance so that she can deliver a speech. Please proceed.
Treasury will remain vulnerable to the same forces that has captured and devastated Eskom, crippled Transnet, and brought Denel to its knees. Without our fiscal discipline, without our commitment to evidence-based policy, this GNU will lack the backbone necessary to confront South Africa's most urgent challenges. We are not here as passive participants, but here as active agents of reform. Every rand allocated, every policy implemented, every appointment made, we will scrutinize with the demands that it needs. Our problem isn't collecting money. It's the resistance to implement the desperately needed structural reform the DA continues to fight for in government. For far too long, Treasury has been forced to fund an underperforming economic model while taxpayers watch their money disappear into black holes of corruption and incompetence. The increase in the 33.7 billion allocation for infrastructure investment over the medium term is welcome. We need to invest more. But if it means nothing, if we continue to build bridges to nowhere and fund projects that enrich cronies rather than citizens, the 7.5 billion allocation to modernize SARS must come with an ironclad guarantee. We will not permit another penny to vanish into the procurement scandals and IT disasters that have plagued the revenue services. Every system upgrade, every technological advancement must be transparent, measured, and directly linked to improving taxpayer service. While increasing funds for the public employment program is important, it must not become a long-term dependency. The 4.5 billion should act as a springboard to private and sector job creation, not a replacement for real economic reforms. Growing requires grit, not just grants. Infrastructure spending is important, but spending alone is not enough. Structural reforms is not a slogan. It is a commitment to control swelling bureaucracy that takes resolve, not just rands. The private sector, particularly our youth entrepreneurs, our emerging digital industries, and our potential for green technologies and tourism remain shackled by the regulation red tape, logistical breakdowns, and service delivery uncertainty. No amount of Treasury funding can compensate for an economy that takes months to grant permits, where we don't run trains properly, and where businesses cannot rely on basic services. The DA will push relentlessly for public-private partnerships that work, that lower barriers for small business entry, and for labour market flexibility that our economics desperately needs. We will not rubber stamp the PRASA or urban projects without clear answers that deliver governance and impact. Answers, not vague promises. How many billions have already been poured into these entities? How many promises of turnaround strategies have we heard? And how many more years must commuters suffer while executives draw bonuses? Every infrastructure, every rand must be tracked, every contract vetted, and every project milestone measured. The days of blank checks and blind faith is over. As a member of the GNU, the DA will be ensured that we uphold these three unshakable pillars. Firstly, responsible spending. We will not support budgets that enable corruption, inefficiency, and unnecessary bailouts. Secondly, fixing the economy so it works for everybody. We will champion policies that unleash private sector growth, create opportunities for growth and jobs, and restore South Africa to the competitive global market. And lastly, a government that gets things done. We demand that public service serves the public and not itself, that Treasury protects taxpayers, not political interests, and government that delivers results, not excuses. To the people watching this debate, understand what hangs in the balance. This is not merely a budget allocation or fiscal projections. This is about whether we choose the path to reform and renewal or continue down the hill of decline and disappointment. Deputy Minister Sarapin's presence at the Treasury represents a guarantee that reforms will not be optional, accountability will not be negotiable, and the interests of ordinary South Africans will not be subordinate to political convenience. We support what serves the country's interests. We oppose to what undermines the economic growth. We fight for every single day that Treasury gives the taxpayers what they deserve. Government delivers on their promises, and the economically that creates opportunity for all people. Honourable Speaker, Vote 8 isn't just a budget line item. It's about the people behind the numbers. It's about the value in the action, accountability across access, reform against rhetoric, delivery against false promises. This is what the DA brings to the GNU. Without us, the centre will not hold. With us, South Africa can fulfill its promise. I thank you.
The next speaker is the Honorable Mawotwe.
Greetings to the President, Commander-in-Chief of the July Movement, the Economic Freedom Fighters, the only dependable tool in the hands of the poor, commissars, ground forces, and the people of South Africa. This year, our glorious movement turns 12. We invite you to celebrate this milestone with us at Kailita Rugby Stadium on the 26th of July. We commend the bravery of Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi in exposing the rot in the South African Police Service and the judiciary. We urge him to remain resolute and never surrender to criminals. Chair, the budget before us is for the National Treasury. Before addressing the specifics, we must offer a historical reminder that under apartheid, Treasury was a department under political direction. It never dictated to the National Party. But post-1994, the former liberation movement surrendered to the Treasury, the Reserve Bank, and the IMF, allowing them to dictate economic policy. Today, the Treasury tells Parliament that the state cannot build capacity, in-source workers, or nationalize the Reserve Bank, not because of legality, but because they ideologically oppose it. We reject the proposed budget of the National Treasury, and we're going to outline the reasons why. The Standing Committee on Finance spends most of its time on money bills, leaving no time or capacity for proper oversight of Treasury or its entities. We proposed a dedicated portfolio committee on the National Treasury to hold it accountable, and will take this matter to the Rules Committee. There is no credible economic recovery plan. In 15 years, Treasury has failed to table a practical economic strategy. Growth has averaged below 2%, while our peers grows at 3 to 4%. Treasury is obsessed with balancing today's budget and is incapable of long-term planning. Their growth forecasts are consistently inaccurate, yet we are forced to rely on them for planning purposes. What we need is increased state spending on education, healthcare, defense, ESCOM, and industrialization, not the austerity culture of this Treasury. Despite commitments made in 2019, there is still no state bank and no sovereign wealth fund. The former minister even tasked Dr. David Masondo, still a deputy minister today, to deliver on this. But what happened? Nothing. Minister, either you want a state-owned bank to protect our people from a banking cabal controlled by a handful of white capitalists and a sovereign wealth fund to preserve this nation's wealth, or you don't. There is no middle ground. Treasury is killing the land bank, and with it, black farmers and food security. The bank must be moved back to the Department of Agriculture, aligned with sector policy and recapitalized. Loan conditions for black farmers must be eased. We reject the so-called spending reviews. These are nothing but tools to entrench austerity under the guise of efficiency. We don't need austerity, we need bold, expanded, state-led investment. We're told that a former Deputy Director General has been appointed without a tender to lead this review process. We'll follow up and expose the rot. Who will believe the AG when she highlights over-reliance on consultants if Treasury is doing the same, possibly corruptly? Treasury is deliberating trapping South Africa with foreign loans for political and policy entrenchment. They are selling the soul of the nation to constrain future democratic choices. Loans from the IMF and World Bank are loans that we do not need and cannot afford. They are locking us into policies that benefit the elite. The EFF has written to the Speaker with all the supporting documents and will introduce a private members bill requiring parliamentary approval for all IMF and World Bank loans. These loans and their conditions must pass through this House. Our people must know. We reject the Treasury's plan to move out of the Pretoria CBD, while the city of Tshwane, led by the EFF MMC, is working day and night to revitalize the city. The Reserve Bank is returning back to the CBD, yet Treasury wants to leave. This is about elitism and inaccessibility. The PIC must be mandated to invest in urban renewal in Tshwane, Johannesburg, eThekwini, and Buffalo City. Government departments must rent office space from these developments, not from politically connected landlords of decaying and overpriced buildings. We also raise a long-standing issue the EFF has championed. Thousands of cleaners, security guards, and other vulnerable workers are having pension deductions taken from their wages, yet these are not paid over to pension administrators, especially by municipalities. The officials and National Treasury and the Financial Sector Conduct Authority continue to fail these workers, perhaps because their own pensions are safe. Our solution is clear. A municipal pension fund similar to the GEPF must be established, one that invests directly in municipal infrastructure and not gambling on the GSC. We further want to state this clearly and unapologetically. We are going to nationalize the South African Reserve Bank, and no treasury is going to stop this. We need a central bank that serves the people, not one captured by private banks, paying them billions every year for doing nothing. That money should be building hospitals, clinics, and schools. We are also concerned by an emerging trend of chronism. The more the ANC loses electoral support and ministerial control, the more its cronies show up as board members of state-owned entities. The recent appointment of David Makhura as a non-executive director of the DBSA is a textbook example of cadre redeployment guised as governance. We'll not keep quiet while institutions are handed over to comrades with no credibility and cannot be redeployed to ministerial positions. Finally, we must ask, why is National Treasury reluctant to provide more funding to SARS? SARS needs resources to modernize, increase capacity, and combat illicit financial flows. This is not expenditure, Minister. It is a multiplier investment that will help the state to collect more revenue and close the leakages bleeding our economy. The EFF categorically rejects this budget. It is anti-poor, anti-growth, and fails to transfer wealth to the majority of our people. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Adebe.
Thank you.
Order, Honorable Members, order.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, the Honorable Minister, colleagues. We note that the National Treasury plans to manage an overall budget of over 2.37 trillion this fiscal year, with debt service cost projection at 385.9 billion, the second largest item after education. Our debt to GDP ratio now hovers around 75.2%, a glaring warning sign that our economy is caught in a trap of low growth, high debt, and shrinking fiscal space. And yet the Treasury's own economic projections remain timid. Only 1.3% growth is projected for 2025. This is not good enough. Treasury continues to emphasize consolidation over stimulus and compliance over creativity, leaving the poor and unemployed to fend for themselves while waiting for trickle-down recovery. We are alarmed that 163 of our 257 municipalities are either dysfunctional or financially distressed. We applaud the efforts that seeks to address the funding model in this regard. This failure continues to erode the front lines of service delivery and places our constitutional developmental vision at risk. We have noted the persistent underspending of conditional infrastructure grants amounting to more than 6 billion in the past financial year. Treasury must also accept its own share of responsibility for rigid grant frameworks, excessive compliance burdens, and poor intergovernmental support. We call for decentralized capacity building, faster turnaround in grant approvals, and and provinces. We remain disillusioned by Treasury's slow pace in implementing the bill and the continued exclusion of rural SMMEs and Black-owned cooperatives from state contracts, despite procurement spending nearing 1 trillion annually. Transformation must be more than policy. It must be measurable, reportable, and enforceable. We are increasingly disturbed by the continued bailouts to underperforming entities. Over 131 billion in bailouts have been issued since 2018. We support developmental state interventions, but not when they are poorly governed and economically irrational. Treasury must implement strict turnaround timeframes, clawback mechanisms, and hold boards and executives personally liable for fruitless and irregular expenditure. We support this budget vote and extend continuous call to Treasury and the Standing Committee to place the needs of ordinary South Africans, especially in rural, unemployed, and underdeveloped communities at the center of public finance. Let us not manage decline. Let us finance dignity, development, and democratic transformation. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Peters, who will deliver a maiden speech.
Honorable Chair, honorable members, fellow South Africans. On behalf of the Patriotic Alliance and as partner of the DNU, we support the 2025-26 budget vote 8 of the National Treasury. We recognize the critical role that the National Treasury plays in ensuring fiscal stability, economic growth, and accountable governance in South Africa. We commend the Treasury's mandate to coordinate the budget process, ensuring that public funds are allocated efficiently and in line with the nation's developmental priorities. A well-structured budget is the foundation of service delivery, job creation, and poverty alleviation, objectives that our party holds dear. We further support the Treasury's responsibility in overseeing expenditure planning, ensuring that every rand spent by government departments is directed toward tangible improvements in the lives of our people. Fiscal discipline is not just an economic principle, it is a moral obligation to the millions of South Africans who depend on public services. Moreover, the Patriotic Alliance emphasizes the importance of monitoring and analyzing public expenditure to root out corruption, wastage, and mismanagement. The Treasury's role in enforcing transparency and accountability must be strengthened to ensure that public funds are not looted by the politically connected, but instead used to build infrastructure, improve education, and deliver quality healthcare. As we support this budget vote 8, we call on the National Treasury to remain vigilant in ensuring corruption-free management of future spending. The people of South Africa demand nothing less than a government that works for them, not for a select few. In conclusion, the Patriotic Alliance stands in support of Budget Vote 8, recognizing that a strong, independent, and efficient National Treasury is essential for South Africa's recovery and growth. We urge all members of this House to put the people first and approve this budget vote to ensure the building of a capable, ethical, and developmental state. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Wessels. Order, Honourable Members. Order.
Thank you, Honourable House Chairperson. House Chair, if the noise subsides and one evaluates the deterioration of our public finances and especially the management thereof, I think one will find that non-compliance started very small. It started with non-compliance with small legislation, not having record keeping in a municipality. Maybe 10,000 rand of corruption or price inflation at a certain department. And then it became worse and worse and worse. And Honourable House Chairperson, it is astounding that one hears to my left members criticizing National Treasury for not being able to contain government debt. Whilst the Honourable Van Rooyen must remember that the last time that South Africa spent less, or government spent less than it earned, was in 2008-9. What happened in 2009? I don't think it takes rocket scientists to establish who became the president in 2009. Now, when we started on that trajectory of more corruption, spending on wrong priorities than what was necessary and what we earned and the revenue that government got in, it became that we had to borrow money. We had to borrow money. And that is where government debt comes from. It's not something that's just there. And what is also astounding, House Chairperson, is that one listens to, especially the MK party.
Honorable Vessels, can you just take a seat? Honorable members, when you interject, must be an interjection. It cannot be a running commentary, Honorable Sokanyile. So can we keep that in mind, please? You are really disturbing the speaker at the podium. Please continue.
Thank you, House Chairperson. No, it's fine. One doesn't hear the noise. Fact of the matter is that if one evaluates that, the government debt became out of control, and government debt is not something that National Treasury can just have disappear. What is ironic is that it's the MKP that stands at these podiums each day and says we must spend more money. We must spend more money. Where does the money come from? But then at the same time, them and the EFF criticizes the private sector because they think the private sector is the big bad wolf. But at the end of the day, it's the private sector that
Honorable
pays
Vessels,
taxes.
will you just take your seat, please? Why do you want to be recognized, Honorable Member?
Thank you, House Chair. You know, I think we need to introduce breathalyzers here
No,
in
Honorable
Parliament.
Member, please.
When
don't-
we enter here,
let's
we
not
must be checked that we are
degenerate.
sober, we are proper.
You are
I mean, we're
not-
debating a very important
are,
matter here. A
Honorable
person just
Member,
speaks about other
You
things.
are out of order.
No.
You are out of order. Please allow the Honorable Member to continue. Order, Honorable Members.
Thank you, House Chairperson. The fact is the honourable member must listen because that is the repetition that we hear in these mini plenaries, is the fact that National Treasury cannot contain the debt. But the fact is that it's parties like the EFF and the MKP that wants more and more money being spent whilst criticizing the very taxpayers out there. Where does revenue come from? Does it just appear? No, it does not. Someone must pay the taxes. But when you criticize and you want
Order,
to make
honourable
it
members.
impossible,
Order. Please continue, Honorable Member.
thank you, House Chair.
Honourable Members, if you continue shouting, then I'm going to recognize you and ask you to leave the chamber. Okay? And that applies to everyone, Honourable Titebe. I'm making a ruling and you're doing directly the opposite. It's not correct. Please continue.
Maar huisvoorsitter, jy hoef nie bekommerd te wees nie, ek kan harde skree as almal hier. Fact of the matter is, Honourable Minister, you need to be commended, you and your team, especially whilst in very difficult circumstances this year, you managed to get a budget here, and we commend you for that. We do, however, caution that there's especially the Public Investment Corporation, and then also other entities that falls under National Treasury, that there should be better scrutiny over, because you cannot manage the compliance of all other spheres of government and departments and have non-compliance under your own roof. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Beasley.
Chairperson, Minister, Deputy Minister, Treasury staff, honourable members and fellow South Africans. There's no doubt that South Africa is facing severe political headwinds, with Budget 4.0 becoming a real possibility. In addition, there's also little doubt that South Africa has entered an era of harsh fiscal constraint. With economic growth stagnating, it is more important than ever that we maximize revenue without furthering burdening already hard-pressed South Africans with additional taxes. In this regard, Action SA welcomes additional 6.5 billion allocated to SARS over the medium-term expenditure framework. With an estimated 800 billion in uncollected taxes left on the table each year, it was simply irrational for SARS to be underfunded for so long. While the campaign to properly fund SARS was principally driven by Action SA, we acknowledge that it was the Finance Committee who supported the call. It is a encouraging example of what Parliament can achieve when we work together in the national interest. That said, SARS remains partially underfunded, and it is critical that Treasury continues to monitor the returns from the increased allocation. Should SARS demonstrate that it is able to deliver additional revenue, any remaining funding gaps must be closed without delay. Chair, Action SA also commends the National Treasury for its tireless efforts in addressing the FAT grey listing. I must admit, I did not believe delisting was possible within this time frame, but credit must go where it is due. The most recent communication indicates that South Africa is expected to be removed from the grey listing at the next FATF plenary in October 2025. That is an achievement worth celebrating. Well done to all those involved. Chairperson, one of the core mandates of the National Treasury is to enforce transparency and effective management of public revenue, expenditure, assets, liabilities, and public institutions. In this respect, Action SA believes Treasury is falling short. As a member of SCOPA, I've seen firsthand the widespread corruption and incompetence that continues to plague many state departments and entities. One glaring example is the Road Accident Fund, which has become a looting ground. With an annual revenue of 50 billion, 5 times the budget of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, 25 times that of the Hawks, and 3 times that of SARS, it is a textbook example of state capture in another form. The RAF is just one of many leaking buckets. Another is the bloated GNU cabinet, with ministers and deputies living lives of excesses while ordinary South Africans tighten their belts. Corruption is not just theft, it is also the systematic abuse of taxpayers' money. And all parties in the GNU have members in cabinet who are complicit in this abuse. In time of fiscal restraint, every cent must be spent efficiently and effectively. Treasury must become more assertive in enforcing discipline across government. It can no longer be business as usual. Chair, in conclusion, the additional funding to SARS is proof of what pragmatic, constructive opposition can achieve in Parliament. Rationality and common decency will always achieve more than hypocrisy, insults, litigation, and empty threats. Taking into account the increased SARS allocation and other positive steps, Action SA supports this budget vote. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Deputy Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson, honourable members of Parliament, fellow South Africans. We present Budget Vote 8 today at a time of immense challenge and opportunity. We are contending with the drag of weaker global growth and facing new risks from intensifying climate shocks and geopolitical tensions. These are the headwinds that shape our economic environment. And in this context, budgeting is about choosing. And the choices the Treasury has made in Budget Vote 8 is to rebuild state capacity, restore fiscal integrity, and pursue reforms that support inclusive and sustainable growth. And let me begin with one of the critical and emerging areas of focus and reform, which is our disaster risk financing strategy. The Southern African region is experiencing a growing number of climate-related disasters, from flooding to droughts, from cyclones to heat waves. These are no longer rare occurrences. They're increasing in frequency and intensity, and they come with devastating human, social, and economic consequences. They also have significant fiscal consequences. When disasters strike, government is forced to reallocate funds from other priorities to respond, often at the cost of long-term development. This cycle of crisis and reallocation is unsustainable. And this is why the National Treasury will finalize and publish a national disaster risk financing strategy in this financial year. The strategy represents a critical shift from reactive funding to proactive, planned disaster risk management. And the Treasury will introduce disaster risk financing instruments, including climate insurance products, to improve response times and predictability of funding, embed disaster risk management and grant frameworks, particularly infrastructure and local governments, and of course support line departments and municipalities in mainstreaming climate risk into their financial planning decisions. But our objective is simple. We need to reduce the fiscal and human cost of disasters by planning for them and not just reacting to them. Climate change is no longer a future threat. It is a present reality, and our budget frameworks reflect that. Second, rebuild public trust in the state. We are not in the business of collapsing municipalities, and we start where government meets. Too many municipalities are failing in their core responsibilities. There are too many service delivery breakdowns, there's fiscal mismanagement and governance failures. And the Intergovernmental Relations Team at Treasury is responding with targeted supports and structural financial reforms. On unfunded budgets, we are undertaking reforms to require credible funded budgets on the basis of municipal financial planning. On revenue value chain reforms, we support municipalities to improve billing systems, strengthen their collection rates, and protect revenue integrity. Without these things, no budget can be sustainable. On capacity building through direct technical support, we're building the financial management municipal officers, particularly CFOs. On financial recovery plans for municipalities in distress, our Municipal Financial Recovery Services provides tailored recovery plans that are grounded in the financial position of each municipality. And of course, we have more work to do to make sure that those local councils in distress actually implement these plans we put together. On MSCOA implementation, the Municipal Standard Charter of Account brings uniformity to local government finances and enables us, but more importantly, the public, to compare apples with apples across municipalities, across provinces, and across time. And of course, we are working with COGTA and the AG and others to ensure that there is consequence management, because public money must be protected, and where there is wrongdoing, there must be consequences. So we have heard the members and are hard at work on local government. A specific area in local government that is quite critical is our Metro Trading Services Reform Program, which I wish to highlight today. And it's our program to turn around these trading services in our major cities, starting with water services. Municipal trading services are vital to economic productivity and household well-being. Yet in many metros, they are financially unsustainable, poorly managed, and in crisis. The National Treasury is leading a program to reform these services through 3 pillars. The first is financial reforms. Metros will be required to produce separate financial statements for their trading services so that we can clearly see what is viable and what is not. This transparency makes the financial relationship between the municipality and the service explicit. Secondly, we're working on institutional and structural reforms. So we're introducing single point accountability for each of these services, including control over support services, asset management, and technical capability, so that there's no more fragmented accountability in trading services and buck passing at a political level. And of course, we are undertaking grant reforms. Members raised that as well. We're introducing performance-based financial incentives linked to reform milestones on trading services. These grants will be used to crowd in loan finance and private capital, enabling long-term infrastructure investment in trading services. This is one of the most ambitious metro-level reform programs that have been undertaken, and we look forward to seeing its outcome. It will take time, but it lays the foundation initially for stable water supply, and in the long run, stable metro services. Now, when we look at the auditing profession, House Chair, it plays a critical role in financial markets and public accountability. And Treasury is currently reviewing the Auditing Professions Act. The proposed amendments are designed to strengthen the Independent Regulatory Board of Auditors and align our regulatory framework with international best practice. Some of the reforms include enabling the IRBA to implement mandatory audit firm rotation to protect auditor independence, authorizing the IRBA to prescribe levies and improve funding sustainability, empower the IRBA to recognize foreign qualifications and conduct reciprocity agreements, remove restrictions that limit transparency around audit inspection outcomes, and strengthen the IRBA's powers to enforce sanctions and extend the board's term of office to ensure continuity. Audit failures seen in the recent past in both the public and private sectors comes at the cost of economic credibility. So these reforms are not just technical changes, they are fostering trust, integrity, and public confidence in the profession and ultimately in the economy. Now, as part of Treasury's broader macroeconomic framework reforms to drive structural reform and attract investment, public infrastructure spending will exceed 1 trillion rand over the next 3 years. This represents the fastest growing area of government expenditure and is aimed at easing supply side constraints and improving public and social service access. The budget facility for infrastructure is being reconfigured to attract private sector participation through multiple appraisal windows and diversifying financing instruments, including guarantees, build, operate, transfer structures, and concession loans. New public-private partnership regulations took effect from 1 June 2025 and have reduced procedural complexity with supporting frameworks for unsolicited proposals and fiscal commitments to be published soon, while municipal PPP regulations will be finalized before the MTBPS. A single National Treasury overseeing structure will be established this year to systematically crowd in private sector finance and expertise, facilitate large-scale project preparation, providing public-private partnership technical support, improve data management, and enhance private sector engagement. Honorable members, what I've outlined is a small fraction of the work that the Treasury does, because the work we need to do to make sure South Africa can recover is not automatic. Reform is hard. Fiscal consolidation is not easy. It's about making the right choices. And rebuilding state capability is especially difficult, but it is work worth doing. Through this budget votes, what we have seen is that the National Treasury has committed itself to the core responsibilities of a democratic state, and that is to spend wisely, to manage honestly, to plan for the future, and to build the institutions that serve all the people of South Africa. And I'd like to take a moment to thank Minister Godongwana for his leadership, Director General Duncan Peterser, the DDGs, and the technically excellent officials at the Treasury. I ask this House to support National Treasury Budget Vote 8, because in doing so, you support the path of responsible, sustainable, and reform-orientated governance. I thank you.
The next speaker is the Honorable Swart.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, we know that National Treasury is the custodian of the nation's finances, and as such, we expect stewardship and we expect servant leadership. Now, we know its mandate is maintaining macroeconomic stability, implementing structural reforms necessary for economic growth, building state capability, and supporting growth-enhancing infrastructure. So it is very key, and the ACDP agrees that we need increased economic growth. Economic growth of 0.1% in the last quarter is not going to cut it, is not going to increase revenue, it is not going to result in job creation. The ACDP also agrees that fiscal strategy must be focused on fiscal consolidation. With debt service costs consuming 22 cents of every rand of the main budget revenue, there is an urgency to contain fiscal risks and reduce borrowing costs. This is an aspect Honourable Minister also referred to, supporting inflation targeting and the care that must be taken when one considers the possibility of reducing the inflation target. Prudent expenditure management is also supported by the ACDP, and we expect the expenditure review that is going to be presented to the Cabinet to bring tangible amendments and tangible savings when it comes to expenditure. Taxpayers are overtaxed at the moment, and they demand value for every rand that is spent. Therefore, the ACDP also suggests that artificial intelligence should be used to look into future expenditure when you can track where corruption is going to take place. So not only retrospectively from an audit perspective, but also it's very clear to see where possible corruption is taking place, particularly in the procurement aspect. There, artificial intelligence and that forensic forward-looking aspects can be used very fruitfully. The ACDP also supports the additional funding to SARS, but with the same acknowledgement that SARS also needs not to apply the heavy-handedness that has seen many complaints being filed with the tax ombudsman. Let us remember that taxpayers are very hard-pressed, as we indicated earlier. We also, lastly, are concerned about some of the investments of the Public Investment Corporation, which manages 2.8 trillion rand in public assets. A lot of the governance issues were indicated by the Mpati Commission and have been improved, but there are certain unlisted investments that are a great concern
your time has now expired.
to us as the ACDP. Thank you.
The Honorable Zibi.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Firstly, I want to commend the Minister for his commitment to expenditure reviews. And what I'm about to say now relates to the importance of that work, but specifically in the context of fiscal and general policy planning. Hopefully, this budget process will soon be over so that we can have you over at the Standing Committee on Public Accounts for a more detailed discussion. I want to focus on the objective to strengthen financial management in government. As we all go through an especially painful budget process this year, I cannot help thinking that although financial resources are limited, our budget is not small either. 2.6 trillion rand is a lot of money. It should be going further than it is now. It should be going further than it is now. It should be going further than it is now. In this context, I want to speak about three things. The first pertains to resourcing statistics, South Africa, Minister. I know that there is a plan in the works, but I am worried that we're beginning to budget in the dark, relying on an old picture whose rapid evolution we do not have the statistical means to track. Population shifts through urbanization are so rapid now that expenditure that makes sense today may produce a white elephant in a decade's time. The second pertains to the impact of climate change, and I'm really grateful, Honorable Deputy Minister, that you touched on this, and the impact of climate change on our national policy thinking and formulation, and therefore fiscal commitments. The disaster in the Eastern Cape for which money has been allocated is a first of many in this budget cycle. There will be many more, much more than our disaster fund can handle. Some of the infrastructure being built now will be delayed or severely damaged by floods, leading to cost escalations at a time where every rand needs to go as far as possible. I am raising this, of course, in the context of the National Disaster Risk Financing Policy. I am glad that it's going to be published during the course of this financial year so that we can finalize it as soon as possible. Finally, Minister, I want to say that there needs to be a decision on IFMS. It is unsustainable and costly to continue without a system that achieves what it was trying to do. I think the Chief Procurement Office and the Accountant General will be more effective with a system in place instead of these 1 million financial tracking and accounting silos that produce the mess that we have to deal with every year. So a decision, notwithstanding the concerns raised about government, governance, and the procurement process and so on, is necessary. Continue with it, or we discontinue and we place something else on the table. But what I know is that we cannot continue as we have been each year. We will support this budget vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Maimane.
Madiba and Honorable Minister and Deputy Ministers, I think it becomes common cause, the fact that this budget vote is less to do with what Treasury does and more to do with what the rest of government does. At times it feels as though Treasury has to give a credit card to a bunch of alcoholic departments and ask them to live within that. And so what we've got to make decisions about today is whether or not we reform or we keep throwing money after bad. The harsh reality of it is that we're living in a macroeconomic climate that's fast constrained. Treasury itself projects the fact that we are going to grow at between 1% and 1.6%. The painful bit is that for every second we are speaking here, government is spending over 13 rand on debt. That's more than any other expenditure that we will see, at least certainly in the medium term. Regardless of the fact that we've given to Eskom, Transnet, and many others over half a trillion rand in the last 10 years, the harsh reality of it is that the people of Dobsonville and many other communities still don't have electricity thanks to load reduction. So the facts on the table are either we reform to live within our means or we continue through a budget that ultimately cannot sustain. Honorable Minister, we have to make tough decisions. And here are some key actions I want to recommend that we think about doing. Local government last year reported the fact that it spent 59 billion rands and showed no real outcome for it. I want to recommend that rather than us going through another report next year by the Auditor General, let us rather go to SAICA, identify key accountants and begin to deploy them to municipalities so that we can capacitate skill and change how money is spent there. I want to really speak equally so about this threat of geopolitics that are faced before us. Minister, it is not your fault, but the reality of it is that yesterday, as the US has already slapped us with tariffs, and that there's profound uncertainty over the post-Russia alignment and some of the issues that speak to our own trade, we now have to make some tough decisions. And I'd like to urge that we urgently find an ambassador to Washington, we begin to negotiate a trade deal, and make sure that regardless of where tariffs go, we can wish away our trade to the West, certainly with the sort of economic pressure that we face. More than anything, Honorable Minister, this does not only fall within your purview, but it is upon us all as honorable members. We have to make big decisions. We have to eliminate corruption. We have to ensure that departments that are spending beyond their means are brought to book. And more than anything, we have to, as South Africa, stop living beyond our means. We must cut these agencies and make sure every rand spent is focused on people. So we borrow for infrastructure rather than for consumption. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. We invite the Honorable Zungula.
Thank you. This budget shows a lack of political will in addressing the problems that are facing the country. It lacks imagination in using Treasury as an instrument of transformation and economic growth. Billions are lost every year to corruption, maladministration, and irregular expenditure. Instead of closing the tabs, Treasury wants to burden poor people. Minister, the approach of government cannot be to increase taxes, yet dismally fail to properly manage the funds of the state. Start by utilizing state money efficiently before you raise taxes. Roads are filled with potholes. The rail system is destroyed. Hospitals don't even have basic medicine. Doctors are leaving the country because the government is not employing them. Where is the tax money going? This is not only bad governance, but it is an injustice where poor South Africans remain poor and the financial system of the country benefits the rich. The unsustainable debt burden will keep the country strained for generations. We are in a debt trap as the country borrows for social programs, not for infrastructure development. The high debt we have consolidates the inequalities as the government diverts spending on social and developmental programs to servicing debt. There are no plans for industrialization and mineral beneficiation, which is a catalyst for growth. The PIC minister has got 2.8 trillion rands in assets, yet there is no appetite to invest in production-driven initiatives that would grow the economy and create jobs. Minister, Black businesses must not be demonized. We must refuse this notion that Black people doing business with the state is corruption, and we must be suspicious over their contracts. Corruption must be dealt with decisively, but ethical Black businesses must be supported to thrive. Minister, the so-called digital nomads must be also taxed. They must make some form of contribution to the economy. We have seen in real time, particularly here in Cape Town, how they've influenced the rapid increase in rent and property prices, resulting in the pushing out of locals from the urban areas. The average local professional cannot afford to live in Cape Town city center. Digital nomads must be taxed one way or the other. Your private-public partnerships strip the power of government to provide for its people. You claim to want to build a capable state, yet practically you are enriching private companies with these private-public partnerships. With your beloved triple Ps, the state bears the risk and the private companies enjoy the rewards. That model is not sustainable, nor is it developmental. Lastly, General Mkwanazi is us. We are General Mkwanazi. We must defend General Mkwanazi from the criminal syndicates that are running our country. We reject this budget.
The Honorable Beckman. Honorable Beckman. Order, honorable members.
Honourable House Chair, I find it interesting this evening to hear the first MK speaker call for a morally upright developmental state in the light of their choice of second speaker, who was behind bars last week. In the light of their choice to nominate members to this honourable House who have been implicated in corruption during the state capture years, and the choice of every one of their members to follow the leader who, as president, presided over the era of state capture, of rampant corruption, and of reckless spending that contributed to the situation we find ourselves in now of completely unaffordable debt, crowding out all the other more important priorities for government spending. But that's not the focus of my address today. Today, I would like to speak about the elephant in the room, a 3 trillion rand elephant called the Public Investment Corporation. The details of its working are buried on page 144 of the budget votes, tucked away between the Ombuds Council and SARS. The more the DA investigates the workings of this elephant, the more problematic they appear, and the more hidden. There are those who feed off the PIC like parasites. And just like parasites, they benefit from this concealment. They would very much prefer that we didn't discuss or focus on page 144, but there we must go. The PIC is so large that there's no pothole large enough to hide it. Not even in the failing ANC, EFF, PA governed Metro of Johannesburg. In fact, there's no sinkhole that's large enough to hide it. Despite the excellent work of the Imparti Commission, people are starting to realize that the PIC has still not been fixed. It's becoming increasingly clear from examples such as Daybreak Foods that the nearly 1,000 pages of the Imparti Commission report have not sufficiently changed the culture of the organization. According to media reports, a number of directors of Daybreak who were appointed by the PIC since the Imparti Commission focused more on looting than on building the company. Eventually, Daybreak collapsed under the weight of this mismanagement, along with thousands of jobs. We are yet to see evidence of negligent and corrupt directors being held properly to account. Madam Speaker, the question is this, Madam House Chair. If we cannot rely on the PIC to be a responsible shareholder, to appoint competent, honest, capable boards, and to hold directors to account for what was once an investment of over 1 billion rands, how can we trust the PIC with over 3 trillion rands of assets under management? As the DA, we are deeply concerned that the nightmare of Daybreak Foods is not the exception at the PIC, but the rule. Or perhaps we should say the absence of rules, because there's been scant accountability when those supposed rules have been violated. We welcome the initiatives of the Minister to look into this. Daybreak is only one of 44 companies inside the PIC's turnaround and value add unit. Many of these companies are in business rescue or in liquidation. It's not even that the PIC can claim that all of these investments are a legacy from the Zuma era of state capture. Just in this past year, we learned how the institution was scammed out of 100 million rands through its investments in Enable Capital. Furthermore, its unlisted portfolio is shrouded in secrecy with very little disclosure at all of what is going on there. And this is very concerning. The pages of this budget vote might hide a 3 trillion rand elephant, but we must not allow ourselves to be fooled. The elephant is not well. The Government Employees Pension Fund is underperforming. The failures of the PIC are eroding the pensions of public servants. It's becoming increasingly likely that pension increases will be reduced towards the minimum permitted by the fund, which is 75% of inflation. Furthermore, if the mismanagement continues, the state will be burdened with a liability for pensions which it cannot afford. It's unconscionable that we smile and nod while the PIC is beguiled by scams, and it's unconscionable that when crooks are feasting on the savings of government employees, the PIC chooses to look the other way and let the looters get away. As the DA, we support the Treasury and this budget vote, but we want to be clear. There is evidence of looting and mismanagement, and as the DA, we cannot and we will not look away. We will probe, we will put the puzzle pieces together, and we will act. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. We invite the Honourable.
House Chairperson, I think that when all of us in this House became members of Parliament, we took the oath to uphold the Constitution. And I would like to remind about Section 35 of the Constitution, which is a presumption of innocence until a competent court has pronounced. What he has done, if he had done outside this House, would have been blatant contempt of court and a violation of human rights. If you want to talk about corruption, honorable vessels, let's talk about the 1913 Land Act. That was corruption. Let's talk about the Bantu Education Act. Let's talk about the Job Reservations Act. That brand nog soos 'n pyl in my heart. What the human rights violations that have happened in this country, and today you have the audacity to stand here and talk like a high priest. Minister, the obligations in terms